Analyst Brenda Wardle joins us via Skype. Good evening, Brenda. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, straight to it. Did the state not have a strong case?
Good evening, Tavile, and good evening to the viewers. Well, perhaps one should start off with the mandate of the National Prosecuting Authority, which is that it must prosecute without fear, favor, or prejudice. Now, when we look at their constitutional mandate, their statutory mandate, what then happens is we have to look at the NPA and go a bit back into the history, because each and every National Director of Public Prosecutions has come under fire when it came to dealing with high-profile matters. We'll remember that with Bulelani Nguga, it was his statement that there was a prima facie case, but the case is not winnable. So I need to say that it's the duty of the National Prosecuting Authority to prosecute when there is a prima facie case, but the NPA is under no obligation to establish whether or not an accused person or a suspect has a valid defense. So theirs is simply to say, do we have a prima facie case? Yes or no, and then they utilize that discretion to basically prosecute a person. Now, when I initially read the charges against Pravin Gordhan, I was not entirely convinced that there was a strong case. However, because we didn't have the information that influenced the decision, I was very, very wary at that time to basically express myself.
Now, Brenda, you've just mentioned now that when you initially looked at the charge sheet, you were not convinced at all at these charges. What happens now? Does it mean the case can ever be revisited, or is it done?
No, it's done. He's decided that they are not going to prosecute. He's declined that to prosecute the matter, because when he took into consideration representations by Oupa Magashula's representatives as well as Ivan Pillay, and if you look at the email or the legal opinion that was sent by the gentleman from SARS, who is the legal advisor, immediately you read that, you draw a conclusion that there is no case and there was no case to begin with.
Brenda, now, in your opinion, was there any unlawful action by the Finance Minister around the retirement? I know you've said that the charges weren't really convincing, but let's look at the legalities around the specific retirement.
If you look at the legalities around the retirement and you have regard to the legal opinion which was given, they sought that legal opinion and they abided by that legal opinion. Now, immediately you do something above board. So, in my opinion, there was nothing clandestine which had actually been done by the Finance Minister. And therefore, these charges should not have been brought in the first place. But the one concern that I do actually have is that we are setting a very, very bad precedent in South Africa. Immediately people can march in support of and make statements a priori, that is before they know what evidence is available, they suddenly jump to the defense of someone. We are going to walk into a trap where people take to the streets in defense of people, even in instances where there are merits to those cases.
Brenda, I'm actually glad you mentioned the public outcry, because it was major. The first time Pravin got the summons, and also we've seen a lot of, whether it's political parties, but citizens at large, trying to defend Pravin Gordhan, organizing marches, etc. Now, let's look at the credibility of the NPA. Today was not a good look for Abrahams, according to society. If you look at social media reaction, if you look at interviews and what people were saying on broadcasting platforms, etc. So how does that affect the credibility of the NPA going forward?
As I said, the credibility of the NPA has always been problematic, and it becomes problematic when they have to prosecute high-profile individuals. With Vusi Pikoli, it was the Jackie Celebi matter. It was him using people who were not vetted to raid the homes of President Zuma, etc. With Bulelani Nuka, it was that pronouncement on the Prima Facie case and the allegations of the timing of the charges with Leonard McCarthy, etc., etc. With Mokotedi Mshe, who was acting national director, we ended up with what is commonly referred to as the spy tapes ruling. And Shaun Abrahams has recently been appointed, and my advice to him would be tread very, very cautiously, because you've seen with your predecessors that immediately a decision has to be taken against a high-profile person in South Africa. It leads to a lot of problems, and you come under the microscope and under an attack. And whether those attacks are warranted or not warranted is a totally different argument altogether.
Now, just finally, Brenda, to wrap up, let's shift focus to the markets a little bit. We saw the Rand rallying earlier on. Does this indicate the level of confidence that investors and the market as a whole has in Pravin Gordhan?
Well, it does, but for me, markets, they were volatile when Trevor Manuel was appointed, and there were no charges against Trevor Manuel. Also, it would send out the wrong signals if the markets want to take a stance of saying immediately you charge a person in this position, then obviously the Rand is going to jump up and down. It could have been the Hillary Clinton situation in the United States. We don't know. So with the markets, it's perhaps it is this, perhaps it is not, but we have already seen that there is a tendency where Pravin Gordhan has a lot of support from a private business in South Africa, and I think also internationally. So for them, it must have come as a relief that those charges against him were actually withdrawn.
Brenda, thank you very much for the analysis. You were great as usual. That was legal analyst Brenda Wardle joining us via Skype for more on the NPA's decision to drop those charges against Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan.